And congregation, we turn now to our next reading in Scripture coming from the book of Genesis, chapter 28, verses 10 through 19. Jacob left for Beersheba and set out for Haran. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night. The sun had set. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. He had a dream. A stairway was set on the ground and its top reached the sky. And angels of God were going up and down on it. And the Lord was standing beside him, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you're lying I will assign to you and your offspring. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west and the east, to the north and to the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. Remember, I'm with you. I will protect you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is present in this place, and I didn't know it. Shaken, he said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the abode of God, and that is the gateway to heaven. Early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he put under his head and set it up as a pillar, poured oil on top of it. He named that site Bethel. But previously, the name of the city had been Luz. Grass withers, flower fades, but the word of the Lord lives forever. And this is the word of the Lord. All thanks be to God. On the mount of the Lord, there is vision. If you've been here in recent weeks, you've heard that already. You'll remember that quote. On the mount of the Lord, there is vision. That's what the place came to be called when Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac. When I wrote my first church newsletter article this year, it was back in January, I made a very not so original reference to 2020 vision. Yeah, I'm not the first one to see that reference. 2020 vision. Oh, this is 2020. So original there. But whatever, right? It works. 2020 vision for 2020. For us, that means 2020 faith vision. Let's work on our faith, not just the easy stuff, but the hard stuff. Let's dive into the Scriptures in faith to see God better, to see each other better, to see God around us and within us, to see the world through God's eyes. Now, of course, at that time, when I was writing the newsletter, I had no foresight whatsoever of what lay before us in 2020. Hindsight is easily 2020, right? But not so much foresight. Not for me, anyway. Driving down a Michigan highway one night, I was not driving as though I was ready for a deer to just jump out in front of me. It almost did. It decided not to at the very last minute. Heart beating, seeing him, turning around, running back into the woods in my rear view very clearly. You can bet I drove the rest of that drive ready for a deer to jump out in front of me at any moment. You know, that deer was there the whole time. He was just wandering up towards the highway as I was driving up towards that spot where we were going to meet. I didn't see him. I wasn't looking for him. At least not until it was too late. Afterward, though, you could say my vision was 2020 about the whole thing. That's easy. Foresight isn't so easy. Not many of us saw a vision of COVID-19 way back in January. Not many of us were thinking about how a virus entering the picture of our lives could put pressure on a system with injustices that have been crying out to be addressed for a long time. Not many of us were preparing for this kind of public health problem, as if history doesn't have any lessons to teach us. Spanish flu in 1918, not seeing it as deadly as it was, made things a lot worse. We see that clearly in hindsight, right? I wonder how well we're seeing COVID-19 in its reality right now. Because we're just midway into it. We've lost over 500,000 people, so over 600,000 people now. At the end of Spanish flu, there was 50 to 100 million people that died. Speaking of the Spanish flu, by the way, they think that one actually started in Kansas. It just got the name Spanish because Spain was the first place it caught press. During the Spanish flu, there was a bad surge of the virus early in the year, and then a much bigger surge of the virus later on in the year around September. Just saying, we know some things from what has already happened that could lead us in the right direction on how to deal with the things that we're seeing today. God has a way of showing us what we need to see. Jacob, who's now after the stuff we've been talking about with him stealing the birthright from Esau, not stealing, but tricking him, very underhanded, getting the birthright from Esau. And also in the chapter right before this one we just read is Jacob getting Esau for the blessing too. And now they've family split up. There's just hatred towards Jacob from Esau. And Esau went his direction, sided with Ishmael to find a wife from that part of the family. And Jacob sets out for Haran. Now remember, Haran is where Abraham's from. So Jacob is basically doing the opposite journey, a reflection of the journey that Abraham took coming down from Haran down to where they were, Oaks of Mamre, Beersheba. So he's doing that same journey in reverse. And as Jacob sets out, he knows, just as Esau knows, that Esau hates Jacob for what Jacob did to him. And Jacob is going forward in fear. He doesn't know what's going to happen. He's on edge. And Esau was tougher than he was. Jacob didn't stand a chance against him if they crossed paths. He didn't know what was going to happen when they crossed paths. And Jacob was a wheeler and dealer, but he wasn't going to be able to wheel and deal himself out of this situation. Jacob sets out going north. He comes to a place to rest, a place that's just right to stay the night. A hilltop, green, showing, a beautiful view of the surrounding country. The sun has gone down, so Jacob finds a nice, soft rock to lay his head on. And he dreams. The stairway to heaven. Oh, that famous song guitarists aren't supposed to play in guitar stores. Stairway to heaven. Angels going up and down the stairway in between heaven and earth. Doing God's work. Very busy. God standing there right next to Jacob saying, look around you. All the land you can see and more is yours. Your children will be like the dust. You ever tried to count dust? And remember, I am with you. I will protect you. I will fulfill my promises. Now that's a wild vision Jacob had. Jacob, the trickster, the schemer, he was shaken. Nothing had ever felt like this. It wasn't like the fear of his brother. It was like nothing he'd ever known. He was shaken. How awesome is this place? He had this realization that he's in the presence of God right where he was. How awesome is this place? It's none other than God's abode. It's the gateway of heaven. One might say, the mount of the Lord. He knew that vision was real. And he took that soft pillow stone and made it a pillar. Put oil on it. Consecrated it to the Lord. Made it a place of worship. And he said, if God takes care of me on this journey and brings me back home safely, then the deal is done. This will be my God. The Lord will be my God. It's funny because, Jacob had to still kind of make a deal out of it, right? But what he saw in that vision was like nothing he'd ever seen before. He was totally believing, but he still just kind of had to work a deal in there. This was the first time that he really knew God was with them. This is the first time that he really knew God had always been with him, and that God would always be with him, and that God is constantly providing blessings for him and through him for other people. His first realization. Jacob gained that peace that he needed to go forward from that moment on that dangerous journey he was on. To go forward not as a trickster, but to go forward as a man of God. With God's help, he'd also have a tithe, by the way. I wanted to make sure to mention that. 10% of all he gained was one of the first responses he had to this amazing experience in the presence of God. He said, I will have a 10% check of all I own with your name written on it, with the divine name on it. A vision on the Mount of the Lord taught Jacob the way to go with his life. Now, to give vision from God, Jesus told parables. Jesus' parables are a way of teaching that is designed specifically to give us those Mount of the Lord visions, those God moments. Jesus' parables are stories told in a way to give us these moments and these visions. Today is a continuation of the kingdom seed story we talked about last week. Last week we were talking about we need to be the good soil for the kingdom seeds. This week, that story modifies a little bit. Today, it's about the wheat and the weeds. Here, instead of being the soil, we are the seeds. We are the kingdom seeds God is dropping around the earth. In secret, the devil comes, plants weeds, tries to take over the soil. To no avail, though. In the end, the great harvester will have the wheat separated from the weeds. God will take care of it, just like we were talking about. Do we hear Jesus' parable and start wondering about who's the weeds and who's the wheat? Do we start thinking, well, I know this one's really good. This has got to be wheat, but maybe weeds over there. Do we come up with ideas in our minds about who the wheat and who the weeds are? Do we begin stumbling on to making those kind of judgments for ourselves? Well, Jesus says, no. No, we are not supposed to think about it that way. We are not supposed to be worried as those workers were worried about getting those weeds out of there so the good wheat can thrive. Jesus says, no. You don't do that. You don't bother yourself with that, because that would cause some of God's good wheat to get pulled out and uprooted too. Let it be. God will take care of it when the time is right. Our job is to reflect on where we are personally, as units, as communities, to personally reflect on where we are, where we hope to be going, and how to be people of God in the process. Our calling is to be God's good wheat, growing and thriving and giving life to the world, no matter what those weeds are doing. Actually, a good point of reflection for each of us would be to individually ask ourselves, am I the wheat or the weeds? A lot of people have found themselves on the Mount of the Lord, seeing the presence of God because of Jesus' parables. It's one big place. The Mount of the Lord is a good place to be. There's perspective there. It's a place where we can see clearly with no less than 20/20 faith vision if we're really looking. And we can tell with no doubt that we are not alone in any of this that we're going through. Seeing a ram ridiculously caught in a thicket, that's seeing that God has already been providing. Seeing Rebekah and Isaac being brought together from this great time and distance apart, seeing that is seeing that God is love, all kinds of love. Seeing two boys, Jacob and Esau, go at it, fussing and fighting with each other, is seeing that God is with us throughout every one of our struggles. Seeing the stairway to heaven with angels on the move, and likewise seeing Jesus telling these parables means seeing the kingdom really isn't so far away. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with all this COVID stuff or the rest of our problems in this country and in the world. I don't have that kind of foresight, unfortunately. I think my hindsight is pretty good. And as we speak, I think my present vision is pretty good because I'm seeing God all around us in this room right now. God is standing next to us as the angels are busy doing all kinds of heavenly work on earth. God is giving us visions all the time, be it spiritual visions, visions in dream, physical visions of stuff that happens. God is giving us visions to see that God is in motion all around us and has been all throughout history. It's important that we pay attention to what God is doing. How awesome is this place? Because we can see visions of what God is doing. And by this place, I mean the sanctuary. I mean your sanctuaries at home. I mean the mount at Bethel where Jacob was. I mean the original Mount of Vision where Abraham was. Oh, how beautiful, how wondrous, how awesome is this place to be here with God. You know, wherever we are with the Lord can be the mount of the Lord. Please remember that. We can be in the deepest, darkest valley and be on the mount of the Lord. Because God is with us all the time. And all the time God is good. We're not the first ones to see that. Not the first ones to realize it. Oh, whatever, it works. Right? That's what gets us through the day. That's what gets us where we need to go. God's grace. I'm still working on my 2020 faith vision. I hope you all are too. But together, let us raise our eyes and pay close attention to the one who is very much with us. May we see clearly whatever it is God would have us see. And may we respond faithfully as God does toward us.